What if the food on your plate has a story you've never truly heard? Well, today we're diving into the arguments from the book What in the World Are We Eating? And I'll tell you, it's a book that might just change the way you look at your next meal.
So, the book kicks things off with a question aimed right at you. At all of us, really. Have you truly seen where your food comes from? And we're not talking about a pretty picture of a barn on a carton of milk. No, it's asking us to look at an origin story that, let's be honest, most of us would rather just not think about.
But for the author, this isn't just some philosophical question. The whole reason he wrote this book, his entire journey, it all started with one single, incredibly powerful experience he had when he was just a kid, 12 years old to be exact.
Blood, feces, sweat, and fear. Wow, that's how he describes his first visit to a slaughterhouse. That one memory becomes the engine for the entire book. It's what drives him to ask the central question. How on earth did we get so disconnected from the violence that turns a living, feeling being into, well, into dinner?
Okay, so this leads us to the book's first big idea. It's what the author calls the invisible line. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You and I, we have no problem watching someone squeeze an orange to make juice, right? But watching a pig become bacon? That's a different story. The book argues that we, as a society, have drawn this invisible line around what we're willing to look at. And to just shatter that line, the book uses art that's, well, it's designed to be jarring, like this. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? The question it's forcing on us is pretty simple. Why is this image horrifying, but an aisle in the grocery store filled with packaged animal parts is just normal? It's a direct challenge to the comfortable lines we've all drawn in our own heads.
And that's exactly what hit the author when he was standing in that slaughterhouse as a boy. So this is where our meat comes from. It was this simple but totally life-changing moment where he saw the huge, massive gap between the clean, plastic-wrapped meat in the store and the living, breathing animal it actually came from.
All right, so if we're psychologically disconnected, the book then asks another really fascinating question. What if there's a biological disconnect too? So now we're going to pivot and look at our own bodies. The book asks a pretty bold question. Are we even built to be carnivores in the first place?
And it poses this simple challenge. Think about it. Could you, right now, go out and hunt a cow with just your bare hands and your teeth? Probably not, right? A true carnivore, like a lion, doesn't need tools, doesn't need fire. The author's argument here is that our complete reliance on technology to eat meat is maybe the first big clue that it's not our natural diet.
Now check this out. The book makes a direct comparison, and it's pretty compelling. On one side, you've got the sharp, tearing teeth of a predator. On the other, the flat, grinding molars of a plant eater. The book's point is simple. Take a look in the mirror. Our teeth, with all those big flat molars in the back, and our tiny little canines, they look a whole lot more like the horses than the lions.
And it doesn't stop with our teeth. The evidence goes way deeper. I mean, just look at this comparison. Carnivores, they have really short intestines to get rid of rotting meat fast. Ours are incredibly long, just like an herbivore's, designed to slowly pull all the nutrients out of fiber-rich plants. From our stomach acid being way weaker to the very makeup of our saliva, the book lays out the case that our internal hardware seems to be optimized for a plant-based diet.
Okay, so from here, the investigation takes a turn into an area that might surprise a lot of people, even some vegetarians. We're about to talk about the hidden costs of two things most of us see as harmless: dairy and eggs.
And this is where the book makes a really crucial distinction. It argues that even if you've given up meat, the dairy and egg industries aren't somehow separate from the slaughterhouse. In fact, it argues they are deeply and tragically connected to it.
This is the reality for the overwhelming majority of hens that lay our eggs. They live in what are called battery cages, and they are so cramped they often can't even spread a single wing. It is a life spent in filth, under constant, unimaginable stress. And then there's this number, 6 billion. According to the book, that's how many tiny male chicks are killed every single year. Often they're ground up alive just hours after they hatch. And the reason? It's purely economic. They can't lay eggs, so to the industry, they are a completely worthless byproduct.
To really get us to feel the reality of the dairy industry, the book uses this incredibly powerful role reversal. It forces us to imagine the trauma of having a newborn baby taken away from you just moments after you've given birth. The book argues that this is exactly what a mother cow goes through, over and over and over again.
And this slide just lays out the brutal, relentless cycle of her life. She is kept perpetually pregnant through forced insemination. Her calf is taken away almost immediately. Her milk is then taken for humans. And when her body is finally exhausted and used up after just a few years, she doesn't get to retire in a nice pasture. No, she's sent to the same slaughterhouse to become cheap meat. The book's conclusion here is absolutely chilling. A dairy farm isn't an alternative to the meat industry. It's just a longer and arguably crueler road to get there.
So, this brings us to the book's final and maybe its most profound idea. It tries to connect the violence we see on our plates to the violence we see in our world, and it does it using a concept you might remember from math class.
First, the book introduces this term, speciesism. It's basically a word to describe a contradiction that most of us live with every day. How can we love and cherish one animal, like our pet dog, but pay for another animal, like a pig, who is just as intelligent and capable of feeling pain and joy, to be killed and eaten?
This image just captures that idea perfectly, doesn't it? Our compassion is totally selective. We see one animal as a friend, a family member even, and the other as a product. The book's argument is that, when you look at it logically, there's no real moral justification for where we draw that line.
So, how does this way of thinking affect the bigger picture? The author uses the concept of a fractal, a pattern that repeats itself over and over again at different scales.
Think about this Romanesco broccoli. See how that big spiral pattern is made up of identical, smaller spirals? That's a fractal. The same pattern, big and small. And this leads to the book's most haunting question. What if violence works the same way? What if the way we treat the most vulnerable beings on the planet creates a pattern that echoes all the way up through society, affecting how we treat each other?
The argument goes like this. Inflicting violence is actually really hard for most people, unless you can convince yourself that your victim is less than. The book claims that the mental gymnastics we perform to turn a thinking, feeling animal into an it, a thing, a product, well, that's a dangerous blueprint. Because if you look at history, the first step to committing atrocities against other people is almost always the same. You have to dehumanize them first.
And so, we're left with this, the book's final provocative question. Is it really possible to build a peaceful world while our daily lives are fueled by products of violence? Can we ever truly have peace on Earth if it's built on a foundation of suffering? That's a really challenging thought to leave you with.